Good morning. Senator Rock, can I ask you to lead us in a word of prayer?
Good morning to all of you, our colleagues. Thank God for safe travel and safe arrival here.
Amen.
Let us bow our heads in prayer. O merciful, wonderful God, we humble ourselves before you today, Father. We thank you again for journey mercies and for bringing us here to this place. Many of our hearts are heavy, Lord, with the many issues that are going on in our country, primarily the whole issue of the coronavirus and its momentarily growth. We ask you, Father God, by your mercies, that you will help us. Clearly, as a people, we have been negligent. We've not been paying the attention we should. And we've taken for granted this disease that we know is killing people all over the world. We pray that by your wisdom, we will pay attention.
Yes.
And we will not take for granted the comments of the people in the field of medicine.
Yes.
We've been told to social distance. We've been told to wash our hands. We've been told to use our masks. Yet we've taken it for granted that these are just words. Now we see our country growing exponentially with this sickness. And I know for many it is scary, it is frightening as we watch and see what's going on. We ask that our people will become a little wiser, a little more obedient, and that we will pay the necessary attention that we need to pay. Today, as we come to this place to usually do the business of the people, we ask that we too, each of us, will make our effort to contribute to the warnings that are supposed to be out there, and that people will listen and not take for granted what they hear. We ask that you will lead us through the work of our president, and that our discussion will be admirable, favorable to you, and that all our intent will be to do rightly and justly to that which we've been called to do. Bless us, we ask. Lead us, we pray. In Jesus' name. Amen. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Pastor. Honorable members, by letter dated 1st August 2020, Cabinet's recommendation has been signified to the Electronic Transactions Amendment Bill 2020.
Bills brought from the House of Representatives.
I recognize the Leader of Government Business.
Mr. President, I rise to take charge of the following bills. 1, the Immigration Amendment Bill of 2020. 2, the Hotels and Tourist Accommodation Amendment Number 2 Bill of 2020. 3, the Quarantine Amendment Bill of 2020. And 4, the Electronic Transactions Amendment Bill of 2020. Mr. President, in accordance with Standing Order Number 49-1, I move that the bills be taken through all their stages forthwith.
Honorable members, the question is that the bills be taken through all their stages forthwith. All those in favor kindly say aye. Those against kindly say no. I think the ayes have it.
Motion relating to the business or sitting of the Senate.
I recognize the Leader of Government Business.
Mr. President, I move that at its rising today, the Senate adjourn to a date to be fixed by the President.
Honorable members, the question is that at its rising today, the Senate adjourn to a date to be fixed by the President. All those in favor kindly say aye. Those against kindly say no. I think the ayes have it.
Public business, government business, motion.
I recognize the Leader of Government Business.
Period of public emergency in the south side of Belize City, declared by proclamation of the Governor General, motion 2020. Mr. President, I move that whereas Section 18, subsection 2 of the Belize Constitution provides that the Governor General may, by proclamation, which shall be published in the Gazette, declare that a state of public emergency exists for the purposes of Part 2 of the Constitution. And whereas Section 18.3 of the Belize Constitution provides that in order to have effect, the proclamation must contain a declaration of the Governor General that he is satisfied that a public emergency has arisen as a result of action having been taken or being immediately threatened by any person or body of persons of such a nature and on so extensive a scale as to be likely to endanger public safety. And whereas Section 18, subsection 4 of the Belize Constitution provides that a proclamation made under Section 18.2 may be made so as to apply only to such part of Belize as may be specified in the proclamation. And whereas Section 18, subsection 5 of the Belize Constitution provides that a proclamation made by the Governor General for the purpose of and in accordance with Section 18 of the Constitution shall, unless previously revoked, remain in force for a period not exceeding 1 month, but may be extended from time to time by a resolution passed by the National Assembly for further periods not exceeding, in respect of each such extension, a period of 12 months, and may be revoked at any time by a resolution of the National Assembly. And whereas, having been satisfied that a public emergency has arisen in the part of Belize City consisting of the part of Belize City known as the South Side, as a result of action having been taken or being immediately threatened by any person or body of persons of such a nature and on so extensive a scale as to be likely to endanger the public safety, the Governor General, by proclamation made on the 6th day of July 2020 by statutory instrument number 97 of 2020, declared on the 7th day of July 2020 that a state of public emergency exists in the part of Belize consisting of the part of Belize City known as Southside, and which is specified in the schedule thereto, and that the proclamation shall, unless previously revoked, remain in force for a period not exceeding 1 month, or such longer period, not exceeding 12 months, as may be determined by resolution passed by the National Assembly. And whereas, recognizing that the period of public emergency shall expire at the end of the day on the 6th day of August 2020, and being satisfied that the period of public emergency persists in the part of Belize consisting of the part of Belize City known as the South Side, and which is specified in the schedule to statutory instrument 97 of 2020. Now therefore be it resolved that this Honorable House, being satisfied that the period of public emergency persists in the part of Belize consisting of the part of Belize City known as Southside, as specified in the schedule to statutory instrument 97 of 2020, hereby extends the period of public emergency in the part of Belize consisting of the part of Belize City known as the Southside, as specified in the schedule to statutory instrument 97 of 2020, for a further period of 2 months.
Senator Rock.
Mr. President, I rise to make my contribution on this matter. This bill, this amendment to the bill, or this proclamation, sorry. There are institutions that our country is run by, Mr. President. Institutions being the family, institutions being politics, of which in that institution we have 144 laws that governs us. There is a judiciary, the institution of the judiciary. There's an institution of commerce, where we buy and sell. There's an institution of recreation, where we recreate ourselves. And certainly there's the institution of religion, where we all are expected to have some kind of religious persuasions, contrary to anybody's demand, no? I rise to make a contribution on this matter because I feel that there are some things that are needed to be said as it relates to setting in place laws or procedure to make sure that our society is safe. When I was growing up as a boy, my family made sure that I adhere to these institutions. Now, and if ever I was found to be in violation of these institutions, I was punished. I was lashed, I was beaten, so that I realized I am not supposed to do that. And from that, I learned that there are some things that we will meet when we grow into a life that we cannot change. They remain stagnant, they remain consistent, that we're not supposed to change them. And I have a lot of colleagues who would talk to me and they would tell me, well, you know, my mother and my father, they were very cruel and they beat me bad and all kinds of things they would tell me about their past. And so what I found is that as I listened to all these comments, I realized that there is a generation that was very angry with what they feel or how they feel their parents raised them. And for that matter, there's a lot of resentful people, resentful to the fact that maybe their parents were cruel, and I will agree that some of them were cruel. You know, the penalties for doing wrong was severe and maybe sometimes excessive. But they rebel against the fact that their mother or their father demanded that they go to church. And to a great extent, there was a lot of things that they are presently rebel against. And you hear people would tell you things like, well, you know something? All those things that my parents used to do to me, I will not do to my children. And all the things that they force me to do, I will not force my children to do. What I learned, Mr. President, is that although these things were maybe sometimes harsh, although they were maybe out of the sorts, it made many of us Belizeans, it made us into very good people. It kept us focusing on what was right and how to build a civil society. I recall the father of the nation encouraging or challenging Belizeans to get up and work. And I think to a great extent, it motivated a lot of Belizeans to do that. But then, Mr. President, one of the institutions I never mentioned was the institution of crime. And the institution of crime has become very obvious in our society. Just like how people take degrees to become lawyers and doctors, it's seeming that this institution of law, of crime, or criminals have taken degrees in law, in crime, or how to commit crime. And in that regard, bringing havoc on those who dare to live as civil society and make a difference among us. I will say that the crime figure in Belize is far less than the overall innocent civil Belizeans. So that when I heard a law like this was supposed to come into action, or a proclamation like this was supposed to come into action, I didn't frown, because when I was growing up, my grandmother used to tell me, the policeman is your friend. And if you live by the law, no policeman will come after you. I've lived my life, all my life, except when I went away to study. I lived my life, all my life in Belize, not having a policeman come to my door except to ask questions of address or so. Nothing else. I lived my life, I was raised up on the north side. But I found a girl in the south side, and I came to the south side and I married. I built my house in the south side. We raised 3 children in the south side. My children are now 33, 34 to 33, to 30, sorry. 32, 34, 32, and 30. They were all raised up in south side, deep south side. But today, I can tell you that because of the principles my family instilled in me. I have a doctor who's one of my daughter. I have a lawyer who my daughter studied law and politics and is now working in the University of the West Indies as a program coordinator for that big institution of the Caribbean. And I have a son who works with the press. All grew up in Southside. So when I hear people talk about Southside as if though it's some kind of scourge, I can tell you that that is not necessarily true. And that institutions must not lose its significance, especially the institution of the family. I think where we are going wrong as a society is because the institution of the family has been messed up. You check out where there's the father and mother in homes, where they are supposed to be leading their family, and you will see families that are very progressive. But you look into some of our homes in Belize, there's no father, the mother, she is frustrated, and the children are going astray. Now, when we institute laws like this, I don't believe it's just for the South Side, you know. Because what I have seen is that there's a lot of things that happen on the South Side that ends up on the North Side. And I tell you why I say that. I pastor a church on Mahogany Street, and I can tell you the countless amount of times that our church have been broken into. And many of the electronic gadgets that we have had in our church that were stolen. I go on my computer, and because of the way computers are designed nowadays, you can search your computer and you can tell where an older device is. And I can tell you, a lot of my devices are on the north side. So what happened? In my mind, it is clear that whoever stole for our stuff could not peddle it on the south side, because the people on the south side, according to everybody, is poor. So it ends up on the north side because they seem to have more money. I think for us as a people, it is necessary that we go back to our origin. Our origin is that we as a people have been given by the Almighty God 10 moral codes to live by. 10 moral codes. Now I say, if God could institute laws to govern people, why shouldn't we institute laws to govern people? See, people have a tendency to go astray. That's why you have people like you, liars and so on. Because there is a need to defend or to stand up for people who break the law, right? Or people who have issues. I'm saying this because, Mr. President, I think that there's a growing missing thing that's among us as Belizeans. Those of us who grew up resenting what we were taught as kids are now reaping the havoc for not disciplining our own children and helping them to understand what civil society must look like. So to institute laws that help to protect the innocent, I have no problem with that. And it's unfortunate that that is so, but there's an old Arabian proverb that says, honor Allah, but tie up your camel. It is simple to understand that people don't do what you expect them to do. They do what you inspect. And I think this is what the law is hoping to do. To inspect so that those who perpetrate crime will not get the privilege of doing so. I don't think it is right as a society to just leave people to wander around and commit crime indiscriminately. I don't think it is fair. The Bible is clear. It says that when the government hands are stayed on justice, the people go astray. And in that regard, it is important that whenever laws are enacted to protect the innocent, I don't think we have to be frowning on that. I think we have to be saying to ourselves, where did we go wrong as a society? What's happening to our families? What's happening to all these institutions that are created to take care of the family? You know what I've seen, Mr. President? I've seen that in our country, we've made a grand effort to take care of our women and children. But you know who we've neglected? We've neglected our men. And these same men are turning around, reaping havoc on us because we pay no attention to them. Now, in my humble opinion, like I said, there's all these institutions. But I will tell you, the institution that is most neglected in this society is the institution of the church. People don't go to church no more. They don't lead their families to church anymore. As a matter of fact, they don't even pay attention to God. And we wonder why our society is growing like that. If you kick God out of the church, if you kick God out of your home, if you kick God out of politics, if you kick God out of everything that is important, we expect. What do you expect? So what we are dealing with right now is of our own consequence. We've created this monster. How we deal with it? I guess the best way we deal with it is institute or enact proclamation to make sure that the innocent are protected. I support this move not because I hate people, but I support this move because it is unfair for innocent people who try to live by the law to be harassed and molested by these people who choose the institution of crime. I think it's unfair. I just hope that Belizeans will understand what I'm saying. I'm not gung-ho on hating anybody. I'm just saying that God himself instituted laws. Even though those were his people, he instituted laws because where there's no law, you all know there's going to be chaos. There's going to be anarchy. And if you look around the world, what's going on right now, let's say we never had law to keep control and order. You see what happened in America the other day? People breaking up stuff, destroying stuff, doing this, doing that. I stand up just to make a motion to declare that I support this particular proclamation. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Dr. Zabini.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. Mr. President, with your permission, before I make my remarks specifically to this motion, I would like to bring to the attention of this upper house the situation that has been occurring in Honduras with our Garifuna brethren. I'd like to acknowledge and thank the 5 of our foreign ministers who have written a letter to our Prime Minister asking for us to make a specific contact with the Honduran authorities for clarification of what they are doing with regards to this situation. As you know, one Garifuna leader was murdered, and they've been suffering serious mistreatment and savagery, in fact. The Garinagu people, you know, are a nation across 3 countries, Belize, Honduras, Guatemala. They are and have been and continue to be a major foundation for the development of our country. Their culture has been recognized, language, music recognized internationally, and for this to be occurring right next to us, I think it is our responsibility and obligation to speak out and to ensure that whatever we can do, even though we have so much on our plate already with COVID and with issues of health and the economic collapsing, that even while this is happening, we cannot forget what is happening there. So I urge all of us here, colleagues, to please make this plea publicly in whatever spheres you are in, so that we can all stand up in defense of our brethren in Honduras. Thanks for that opportunity, Mr. President. With respect to this motion, Mr. President, and following from what our colleague, Reverend Rock, has just mentioned, we're dealing with a very difficult situation of crime and violence in our country over all these years. And in recent times, the government of Belize has determined that using very stringent and tough measures is the way for them to address this situation. We've heard in just a couple days ago on Monday, the debate on this matter, so I will not go into much detail, but on this side, we feel that extending the state of emergency in the south side of Belize City, so-called south side of Belize City, is not the panacea for the problems there. That in fact, one of the main responsibilities of government has been abdicated, where we have not dealt with poverty, with those social issues that impact what people do when they're in dire situations. Now, I am in full agreement and concert with those who will say that because you are born in poverty does not mean that you are going to be a criminal. We can pick out many persons in our society who have grown up in humble settings but have worked hard and somewhere along the way have had the support to be able to succeed in life. Right in here in this house, in the Senate, we have examples. However, this is where we need to give value and credence and worth to scientific investigation and work. This is where we engage now as generally students of human affairs, and we specialize in different areas. So that people who specialize, for example, in sociology or social work or anthropology, we need to go to them and find out what they have learned from years and years of research, investigation, searching for answers on this matter. We find, Mr. President, that research shows that why many people who live in these impoverished environments may be prone to crime in general is because of the family situation. Has to do with the value system that they grew up in. Did they have, if they may not have had their father or their mother at home, did they have an aunt, a guardian, someone who stuck with them along the way from early on to ensure that they stayed on the right path? Well, for all of my friends who have succeeded out of those environments, they can point to some people, 1, 2 persons who were there for them to carry them through. Maybe even it might have been a teacher or a number of teachers along the way. But we find, Mr. President, that when we look at the statistics in Belize and we see that, for example, in high school, only 51% of students between the ages of 13 and 16 are in secondary school. We must ask the question, well, why is that going on? Why is it that half of them stay in but half fall out? Is it that the half who stay in all have parents or guardians or somebody who has been there to assist them, and the others may have not? Well, you might be surprised to find out that there could be a very strong correlation there. That in fact, yes, you're not doomed to become a criminal if you grew up in a poor environment, but when you don't have the support systems, that is when there's difficulty. When there are no interventions on your behalf, that is when you have problems. We know of the famous Gale report, Mr. President, and if you allow me just to read off a couple little points. The Gale report actually it was published in 2010, and it's Gale and Mortis. One of the things that you will find in there is that it says that on the south side of Belize City, the family structure is much weaker, with 2/3 of fathers missing from the household. That's just one glaring point from the Gale report, among many others, that speak to the fact that young men in particular, who don't have a role model, a father role model, are more susceptible to falling into this trap, where they then go and seek that kind of father figure in other entities, in other groups, in gangs, for example. The experts are telling this to us. So if we read carefully what the experts are telling us, Mr. President, and we give value to it, then we must create interventions that are meaningful along the lines of what we are to be guided by the results of the research. We have not seen this occur in a significant way. Therefore, it means that government must prioritize its expenditures if it is serious about poverty, if it is serious about improving the lives of our people, towards social investment, as opposed to infrastructure, cement and steel investment. This has not been done, Mr. President. The hundreds of millions of dollars that have been prioritized into the infrastructure policy that this government has undertaken has deprived investing in our social side of the equation. Because it's not just to put a pittance of money and say we're going to do a little crime intervention here and there. No. It requires significant investment, especially in higher education. We need to train people at the highest levels who can conduct research, just like Dr. Gale did, on a continuous basis. This one was from 2010. We should be having research reports coming out every 3 to 6 months on different aspects of these problems. Right? We have young male violence as one issue. Right? We have teenage pregnancy as another issue. So we need trained, capacitated people to do that. But how can the University of Belize, or a national university, be able to do that when it doesn't get the investment that it needs to get to be able to develop its social work program or develop a sociology program? These are the kinds of things, Mr. President, that will have the necessary razor type of impact that we need. Now we can throw up our hands and say that, oh, in other countries, crime is also rising. But there are also other countries in which they're not, in which it's gone down, in which it's almost zero. So instead of us keeping our eyes on the worst situations around the world, let us bring out situations where we're seeing progress and find out what it is that has occurred there. Let us stop finding excuses for our situation by saying, oh, somebody else did do the same thing, and look to other examples where, for example, in certain countries, investment, real millions and millions of dollars have been invested in protecting and securing the family, in training young persons on parenthood, in training teachers how to deal with students who come from these types of environments. If we have limited number of teachers, they are under stress because they have an overloaded curriculum. They themselves are struggling because we do know that they have difficulty with low salaries already, internationally speaking. Teachers are under stress. And so we are also expecting our teachers to be magicians, to do wonders in the classroom with these young students who are coming in. Right?
We're talking about? We're talking about teachers now and salaries now and what? We're talking about a state of emergency, constitutional.
But I understand the senator to be speaking about the policy implications. He's speaking about the fact that government's policy should be different.
As it relates to the pays for teachers?
It's germane to the bill.
What?
It's germane to the proclamation.
Foreign affairs next? I mean, what?
It's germane to the... Continue, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President. And I'm sorry I create angst in the Attorney General because we are
Senator,
touching on the things
sorry.
that this
Sorry,
government should have been
one second.
doing,
Sorry.
and they have not done it. And when we speak to all the different aspects of what is necessary for us to solve the problem, then they get defensive, Mr. President.
Yes. No,
Right?
but Attorney General,
Right?
Attorney General, you cannot make a comment that what a senator is saying is boring. That is unacceptable. Cannot happen. You may consider it irrelevant, but the senator has a right to speak. He's addressing
please-
government policy.
Thank you,
Continue,
Mr. President. Thank you. I would hope that if we keep a focus on, you will see the linkages are very strong to every point that I am making. Right? And it speaks to the point that, Mr. President, developing policy should not be a whim. It has to be inclusive of many different factors. And that is where sustainable human development concepts and ideas come in, Mr. President, because when we understand that there are linkages with our decisions, there are economic linkages, there are political institutional linkages, there are sociological linkages, there are environmental linkages to all of our decisions, and we bring all of those to bear on every decision, then we realize that decision making is not an easy thing, and you can't just do it overnight like that. You have to bring in the experts from all these areas to help us to understand so that the policy can be correct. Well, I also like to learn too. And Mr. President, I don't take this lightly. It's not a matter of pointing down or talking down anybody. I think it is critical that we start to take very seriously policy decision making, that the process is done properly and it's inclusive. It brings in, we consult with those experts. Because here we're asked to pass this motion. It's a policy to go for 2 more months on the south side, impacting young people who have been committing crimes and violence. And so we have to get to the bottom of it. We need to dig deep into it to find out what might be the causes. And I would hope, Mr. President, that if we ever get the chance to be on that side, that we can be humble enough to listen to when an opposition would be here sharing good ideas, that we can learn, that we can be open-minded, right? And that we can be respectful. Because that will be the only way that we can ensure that the policies will be right for our people. I want to make reference to one more piece of research. This one is in a developed country. This one is recently reported in London. As you know, the issues there of crime have also been of great concern. And the paper published just recently in July of 2019, so just a little over a year ago, speaks about the link between poverty and violent crime. And with your permission, I'll just read a little bit, Mr. President. Thank you. All right, and it's speaking to, this was commissioned by the municipality, the City Council of London. And it says here in its summary, it says, City Hall, I quote, City Hall has published new analysis confirming a strong link between serious youth violence and Londoners affected by deprivation, poor mental health, and poverty. It said the new figures show that 3/4 of the boroughs in London with the highest levels of violent offending are also in the top 10 most deprived, while the same boroughs also have higher proportions of children under 20 living in poverty than the London average. The statistics in the most detailed study of the causes of violent crime ever undertaken in London show that more than 1/4 of all young Londoners live in the most deprived areas of the capital. Unquote. There is a very strong linkage between poverty and high rates of violence, Mr. President. And there are numerous studies that have shown this. It is therefore incumbent, it is therefore a responsibility of the government to do everything possible to alleviate poverty. And we are seeing, we had the last data on poverty, Mr. President, as you know, was in 2009, where we have 41.3% of our country living below the poverty line. From 2009. And we have seen from observations that the situation has certainly not improved since 2009. It must be a priority, a number one priority for any government, Mr. President, to focus on poverty reduction, alleviation, and elimination. Those must be, and they can only be done when we have social interventions, specifically in education and in health, that are effective, that are based on research and evidence from experts. This is critically important. And I will say this personally, from my own Christian values, that I also agree with Reverend Rock, that we cannot have God absent from our lives, because then it is going to be practically impossible to have a strong family that is necessary for us to care for our young people. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Salas.
All right, thank you, Mr. President. We will not be opposing this motion, Mr. President, but I do need to make a few comments. I start by saying that if these were pre-corona days, quote-unquote normal times, I would have had serious reservations to support this motion. But these are corona times, and I need to give the Commissioner of Police the benefit of the doubt when he said, and I will quote him, "The police are extremely busy, and we are going to be even busier now dealing with COVID-19 related offenses. The police officers will be able to focus as much as they can on COVID-19 preventative measures." We see, and I have said this before, over the past 4 or 5 meetings that we have had in a month and a half, that in relation to Corona, to COVID-19, we will be responsible for our own quote-unquote demise. We see people flagrantly ignoring, whether ignorantly or willfully, the rules that have been set aside for our own protection, for our own health and safety. Over and over and over again. We are now running the risk of, again, locking down parts of this country as a result of new infections. And we should all be extremely worried about what that will do to our already ravaged economy. I'm a business person, and I'm very worried if my district of Orange Walk is locked down, what that will mean for my family's business. And I am sure we all share that concern. So, depending on what parts of the country get locked down, a lot of things are, probably will have to be taken off the table. August 10 school reopening, August 15 PGIA opening. So, it reminds me that I've heard some people say, and I agree, that we should not be worried about the tourists as much as we should be worried about our own selves. So yes, going back to the Commissioner of Police statement, I can see where the police will be needed even more out on our streets to ensure that we abide by these rules. And there is so much out there that needs to be checked. But now, I want to present what may be an inconvenient truth to some. States of emergency, it's not a, was never intended to be a crime-fighting tool. Never. Last year we had one where 80+ people were locked away. We just are finishing another one and therefore here today to extend it for another 2 months. Locking down parts of Belize City will obviously won't solve the crime problem. It will not. And in that same track, almost exactly 2 years ago, I was one of 2 social partner senators who did not support the Crime Control and Criminal Justice Amendment Bill because we saw it as draconian, we saw it as part and parcel of what we can refer to as mano dura policies that have been shown to fail, miserably fail, time and again all over the world. Mano dura policies do not solve our crime problem. So, I want to go back to some comments like my colleague shared earlier that were shared at the House meeting 2 days ago, and in particular by the representative for Freetown and the representative for Pigstock. And I agree with a lot of what they said, but there is one point I want to raise that I agree with the person who presented it, could be one of those innovative, bold strategies that we need to put in place if we are to have a chance to address the crime problem. And it is the idea of a youth service corps. Now, the representative for Pigstock has been chided on both sides of the aisle for his comments. And in trying to kill the messenger, I want to make sure that the message is not killed. That of a youth service corps, I believe, is a terrific idea. One of those bold ideas that we need to put in place if we seriously want to combat the crime problem. One of those out-of-the-box innovative ideas that will target all youth, not only youth at risk, but all youth, where we provide a service to our country during our vulnerable teenage years, be it 1 year, 2, up to 4 years. And like that, we learn to be productive citizens. We learn discipline. We learn skills that we could then put to use for the development of our country. But that will need political will to put something like that in place. And I commend those who supported that, who mentioned that 2 days ago. And I would like to ask, actually I would like to challenge the political party that will form the next government to put this in place, to start to work at putting this in place immediately upon being elected, to treat that as a priority. And there are so many other tools in the suite of solutions that can be put in place to try and address the crime problem. But locking people away for a month, 2 months, 3 months will not do it. It could actually be counterproductive because they will not be rehabilitated. They might come out, they might come back to society more angry than when they went in. They will probably be feeling vengeful. So it won't solve it. We can say we lock them away for a while and so we can rest easy for a while. In the long run, it will not work. And I am not just talking off the top of my head. I've read about what has happened in Jamaica. I've read about what has happened in other countries. And in Jamaica, the government has been taken to court for doing something like that as well. So, I don't put it beyond some citizens or citizens group to do something similar like that if we see states of emergency continue to be used as a tool to fight crime when it should not and was never intended to be that. So I end, Mr. President, by saying that these are special times, and as a result, I won't stand in the way for this extension. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Shabbat.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I'd like to start my contribution this morning by quoting the Honorable Sadi Elrington. I think he said some very important things on Monday when he spoke about this bill. And if you allow me, Mr. President, his quote was, just quoting from his speech, he says, "I have not seen any proposal or project come forward to treat with the real root cause of the problem. The root cause of the problem is poverty. The root cause is ignorance. The root cause is lack of capacity. To treat with this problem, we don't have to come here over and over to impose a state of emergency. We have to find a final solution to the problem." Mr. President, I dare to say that where we find ourselves today is as a consequence of failed government policies over the past 12 years. For the past 12 years, Mr. President, we have seen investment, we have seen billions of dollars spent on roads and roundabouts, while we have seen hardly any investment on the people of the South Side in Belize City or in the country at large, Mr. President. After 12 years of this UDP government, over 40% of our people are now living below the poverty line. The conditions in which the people of Southside Belize find themselves, Mr. President, mirrors most of what we're living and experiencing across this country. A failed education system, lack of sporting facility and adequate sporting programs to help uplift our youth, no culture, no art, no jobs, no hope, Mr. President. In Kayonert, where I'm from, for example, Mr. President, the area representative has not built a house. He has not spearheaded any initiative for the creation of jobs. Neither have they built any sporting or adequate sporting facilities for the young people in Kayonert, Mr. President. And this is the job of the leaders of this country, to create enabling environment for people to be able to lift themselves and to aspire for better things for themselves and their families. But it seems, Mr. President, that once they got into government, they forgot about the people of Belize. Mr. President, it amazes me that after 12 years in government, the Honorable Sede Elrington has finally found a voice. He suddenly knows what the solution for Southside Belize City is. But I ask, Mr. President, where has he and the other ministers of government been for the past 12 years? What Sede, Booth, Finnegan, and Dean did not tell the Belizean people on Monday is that while the children of the south side of Belize City are hungry, they have no hope, and have literally, Mr. President, resorted to killing each other. They have taken the last 12 years to send their children to law school and to give their families the best education money can buy. Mr. President, while the bullets of the gunmen haunt the children of the south side of Belize City while they sleep at night, these ministers and their family sleep comfortably on the north side of Belize City. Mr. President, the Honorable Finnegan spoke about how the Samuel Haynes Institute of Art was created to arrest problems in the south side. They have cabinet making, furniture making, schools and library halls to lecture children. He said it's not Sede's fault because he tried. Sede represents that area, Mr. President. How does the fault not lie with him? If an institution is designed to assist and it is not getting results, isn't the goal to revise strategies, change gears, and try again? But you see, Mr. President, this government does not care about the people of the south side of Belize City. They prefer to have spent $7 million on Farbers Road instead of investing in the people of the south side of Belize City. With the excuse of the COVID pandemic, the first ones to suffer are the people of south side, where the government has now cut back on NHI. So now the people have limited, and in some cases, no access to health care. You see, Mr. President, the poor people of Southside have kept this UDP party in government for the past 3 terms. And what has been the consequence for them, Mr. President? Over the last 12 years, the majority of them have become poorer and poorer and poorer. But, Mr. President, there is no need to worry, because this government has given them pantry and boost. And what has been the consequence of that, Mr. President? More poverty, more hopelessness, and more crime. But let's not worry about the crime situation, because they also have a solution for that. They have locked up the young men of this country for 30 days from the south side, and now they're asking us again to lock them up for a further 60 days. Mr. President, this cannot be the cure for this situation. We cannot use COVID as an excuse to deny our citizens fundamental rights, Mr. President. We cannot continue to lock up our young men who have not been convicted by the courts because we fear or because we have failed to address the root cause of this problem, Mr. President. We can stand here and we can say all that we want, but if we do not address poverty wholesomely, Mr. President, we are not going to reach any further in our society. This problem will continue to plague us. Mr. President, I heard my colleagues speak about the absence of the family and the absence of the mother and the father in the homes, and they seek to put blame on this situation. But, Mr. President, the fact of the matter is that mothers and fathers have to sacrifice family life rearing their children because they have to go out and find a job to provide for their children, Mr. President. That's the reality. That's the reality. Where are the safety nets for our families? Where are the safety nets for the most vulnerable in our society, Mr. President? We spend $183 million on a road to nowhere when no tourist is coming into this country, but we have not invested in our people, Mr. President. But yet, we're going to go and lock them up for 60 more days. How can that be, Mr. President? You see, Mr. President, they say the best is yet to come. And they talk about imagine the possibilities. Well, we don't need to imagine anymore. And we know the best has not come for the Belizean people, Mr. President. It has come for them and for their families. But they have forgotten the Belizean people, Mr. President. And that is why today they want to lock them up for 60 more days. I want to see what will happen at the end of those 60 days to these people whose rights have been denied, Mr. President. It is time to get this right. And it is obvious that they cannot have, and they don't have the political or the willpower to get it right. It is time for them to go, Mr. President. Thank you very much.
Senator Bennett.
Mr. President, my colleagues they have presented quite elaborately on this particular motion. And so my position this morning is basically to make an appeal to the government to start empowering our criminal justice system processes more so that we can find justice in every crime that is done in this country. I am appealing to the government for us to see money bills that will have a focus on education of public value as well as education of society within the context of families. All of that research, all of that definitely supported by research so that we can have a change in our situation. Locking down a particular portion of the population is not the solution. I understand that it's needed, but it's not the solution. Dr. Zabani had done an excellent job earlier, and I will not reiterate it really, other than to say, please let your plans be based on research so that the people of this nation does not have to be subjected to, I can't say it's illegal because it's going to be passed as a law, but at least to these inconveniences. One meal cannot feed everybody. As we always say, the good will suffer for the bad now. So our vendors who are hardworking, who are on the streets, trying to make an honest living to provide for their family will now have to be curtailed. And then the pantry and the booth's not enough. The money is not reached now yet. So what will happen? What do you expect will happen in those home settings? Please, I'm asking you. Let's use the technicalities that we have in the different ministries in order to have the impact, in order to have lives change anywhere in this country, not just on the south side. Because we label the south side, but there are criminal activities that are happening throughout this country.
Senator Smith.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise to make my contributions. I'm going to be brief because my colleagues have already said some of what I wanted to mention. But, Mr. President, I have spent my 36 years that I've been in Belize City since I left my home of Toledo on the south side. I've raised 3 sons on the south side. I've lived in Lake Eye, and I now live in the George Street, West Street surrounding. And my children and I have had to walk through those areas on a daily basis, going and coming from school, going to St. Ignatius. we have been lucky thus far, thank God, that we have not been met with any type of violence in all of this time. But I do think it's because many of the young men around the area have gone to our school, and so they're familiar with you. So when you pass, morning teach, evening teach, that type of respect. So we have been fortunate. It makes you wonder, Mr. President, how we have come to the point where we are. It's not that we don't know. For sure, there is an issue with our families. We can't get away from that. We have moved away a lot from our morals and values, and that that has created some of what we are seeing now. We have a lot of young persons having children. They themselves might not know how to properly rear these children, and so there comes then an issue of disciplining their children. We also see where some of these young persons, their surroundings, they may have come from good families, but the surroundings, that they are in might have influenced them and the things that they do. And I am in no way saying that what these persons are doing is acceptable. We cannot condone those type of behaviors. We definitely can't. We see where persons who we know quite well have been victims of crime and violence. And so it's not that we are condoning. We look at the matter of poverty in those areas, and we see that those might be the areas where we have more persons who are in that bracket, living in poverty. And there are many reasons for that, and we can't just put the blame on one person, one area, one entity. These things are combinations of different things that get us to this point where we are. So I would not totally blame parents, I would not totally blame government, I'm not going to totally blame circumstances, because they are all different. And so while some of these areas might have more impact on the reasons why we see crime and violence, we have to look at the overall issues with these persons. Senator Dr. Zabani spoke about the Gale report, and we know about the Cook's report as well, and then there was another one. So I don't need to go there. But there have been some very good recommendations that maybe we may need to look at more seriously and look at implementing those. At the end of the day, Mr. President, we believe that crime happens when resources are not properly shared, and some get more than others, and persons don't have or don't believe that they have the means to get out of poverty, and so they resort to these criminal activities, which again we do not endorse, because as poor as we may have been, and looking at where we came from, we were always taught that not because you're poor it means that you have to be bad or be rude. And so we were never taught that that is an excuse for doing wrong. So we would not condone to say that because I'm poor, I have to engage in criminal activity. That is not so. There are other things that we can do. What we're saying, Mr. President, is that there are programs that the government has in place. Poverty alleviation has several aspects to it. We know that things like 4-H, CYDP, all of these things that have been put in place to try to help our young people. But we have to take an evaluation of these programs and see the depth to where these go and how much progress we have made with these types of programs, what kind of impact these programs have had. And if they have not had the kind of impact that we want them to have, then what is it that we need to do to enhance these programs to ensure that they have the impact that we want them to have? As I said, this is something that is all of our business. So we cannot just depend on one area, one entity to solve crime. We have to try and do our part. As teachers in the classroom, we have a role to play as well. Because these students come through us and, as they get older, things happen. And so we too have to do our part to see how best we can steer them in the right direction and try to discourage them from going in that direction. But we know that peer pressure is a huge impact on persons, getting involved in these types of things. So what we want to emphasize is the fact that let us do some evaluation, some monitoring and evaluation of the programs that we currently have. Let us see what is working and do that more. And what is not working, let us strengthen those areas that we need to strengthen. Because at the end of the day, as I said earlier, Mr. President, crime impacts all of us. And we might not have been affected as yet, but we never know when that time will come. And so I think if we put our heads together and we work on strengthening the areas that need strengthening, and we put in place more strategies, more programs to help to support these young persons, then I think that we would be able to see a difference in our society. But it has to come from joint efforts and joint collaboration. We cannot be dismissive of other persons' suggestions or recommendations because we see them as opposing us. We have to look at all areas and all groups that can provide us with suggestions and recommendations and see how best we can implement those. At the end of the day, it is going to be for the good of the entire country. All of us will benefit when we have our young people meaningfully engaged and moving away from crime and violence. Thank you, Mr. President.
Attorney General.
Mr. President, I don't know if Pastor Rock get up fire now. So, President, on my way up to the Senate this morning, I see one dead dog on the road. And I asked myself, I wonder if the PUP will say the government didn't provide enough of a safety net for that dog. Or the government doesn't have proper facilities for dogs to thrive, and wonder if we will even be blamed for that. I could not believe my ears when I heard senators in this room would argue against this motion, would argue against locking up criminals simply because they have to criticize the government. Even this is not without its criticism of government. Makes me wonder if some of them would cry poverty and we need to do something about poverty if one of the gunshots were to reach their doorstep. You talk about getting on the ground and hearing suggestions. None of you have to deal with a mother who is holding a baby in her hands and shots are fired, hit the mother in the hands and miss the baby by just a couple inches. You all can pontificate in here because you don't have to deal with that. You all can talk about, oh, we need to deal with poverty and poverty and poverty. And we're making suggestions to you, so you should listen. No, you're not making any suggestions. We're saying the same thing over and over. All I hear is that you want world peace. But what's the suggestion? Because Mr. President, when you listen to the PUP senators, especially, and I won't say how many of them there are, but when you listen to the PUP senators, you would think that from 1998 to 2008, there was no crime. None. There was no crime in Belize. Absolutely no crime in Belize from 1998 to 2008. There was absolutely no poverty in Belize between 1998 and 2008. None. Because they have all the ideas and all the solutions. So what did you specifically do to make sure that there was absolutely no crime of this nature in those 10 years? What did you do to make sure that there was no poverty during that period? What did you do? What are the specific suggestions that you have? The answer is none. Absolutely none. We get up here and talk about, listen to suggestions and listen to...
Yes, yes, Senator.
Mr. President, I gave some specific suggestions.
That's not a point of honor, Mr. President.
No,
Where's the
but-
specific?
No, but he's misquoting what we've said, that we are not giving any suggestions.
Mr. President,
I
I'm
gave
not
some
yielding.
specific suggestions.
I'm not
Mr.
yielding,
President.
Mr. President.
Right? I gave some, I just
Mr.
want to say
President,
that
I'm
if
not
he didn't want to
yielding.
hear it, that's his
I'm not
business.
yielding.
But I gave
Senator,
some
Senator,
specific,
Senator.
There are rules, Mr. President.
specific suggestions.
There are rules. Be quiet. There are rules, Mr. President. I didn't yield. You had your turn.
Yeah, but I could correct you.
No, sorry, senators, 1 second. Senators.
You're misquoting it.
You, Dr. Zabini, there is provision in the rule where you can
You can clarify, Mr. President.
clarify and say that he has misquoted you, and you can make reference in relation to that. If you want to do that, I'll allow you to do that, but it would be after
My
the senator
counter-argument will
concludes.
be, Mr. President, at no time did I say Senator Zabani said this. I never said that. I never said that. So how can he correct something that I did not impute to him specifically? But in any event, doesn't matter. The hypocrisy of the PUP when the government is trying to do something. Here you have people who are terrorists within our society, wreaking havoc and causing problems. And you all can play politics because it doesn't affect you directly. What is the government supposed to do? In the midst of all that we have to do at this stage, in the midst of all that we have to make sure that we have properly in place to fight a present pandemic, what are we supposed to do with people who are causing havoc in our city and in our country? We're supposed to cuddle them. We're supposed to sit down and have a conversation with them. We're supposed to try and talk poverty with them. And I don't care who said what and who studied what and who come with some kind of foolishness about, oh, there is some directly, and just because you are poor, you have to be a criminal. Who says that? Who says that? It's a coupled argument to defend criminals. And none of you who simply want to make cheap political points to argue against a state of emergency like that will get away with that with me. You think that because you speak about poverty, somehow the people of this country who are poor will side with you? You think because you get up and dress in a Garifuna shirt and praise Garifuna, the people will side with you?
Attorney General.
You think because you speak about Kyle North? Attorney
General, we will. address the issue of the bill, because now that is making personal references against a senator.
But he raised it?
So, the senator
Raised
did
it?
not, Attorney General, the senator did not raise anything in relation to you. You're making a reference in relation to the senator personally. Stick with the bill.
Stick with the bill. Well, we on this side will stick with the bill, Mr. President, because that's what we're proposing, a bill. But I'm trying to make the connections like all the senators are allowed to do, however wide those connections may be. And if it has nothing to do with the bill, why did he mention it when he rise to speak up on the bill? Why did Senator Shabat have to speak about Kayo North? Is it because they're running in those divisions? They can't get up and make pretentious statements and take pretentious positions to further their political career in the Senate.
Attorney
That
General.
has to be commented upon.
Attorney General, if a person comes and a person discusses policy and says that there's an alternative in relation to doing something, that is within the scope of it. If somebody puts an argument in there, like a one argument in there, that is within the scope of the debate. But the tenor of your argument cannot be in relation to particular senators.
Mr. President, one of the senators spoke about the countries that have low crime rates and are successful. The senator didn't mention the country. He just said, well, there are countries where the crime rates are low. What are they doing? He didn't mention the country. There are countries that are doing well. Didn't mention the name of the country. But let me give you one name, because I'm sure everybody knows about this one, Singapore. There was a leader, Lee Kuan Yew, I think his name was. And it's always touted as the example. And certainly, well, let me show you how I do my research. Certainly how Singapore was one of the leading Asian tigers, if not the leading Asian tiger, with such great economic progress and reform. What a lot of people don't recognize are the steps they took to make sure that crime was low. And it wasn't focused on programs, Mr. President. It was focused on stiff penalties for the committing of crimes. It was based on the whole concept, for example, of dada is death. Means that if you get caught with drugs, whatever type of drugs, whatever small amount, the penalty is death by hanging. So Singapore's crime rate did not fall solely because of some poverty alleviation project here or there. It fell because the judicial system, the national security apparatus were strict on people who committed crimes. In our constitution, from which the state of emergency emerges, it is the constitution that allows us to put in a state of emergency to protect law-abiding citizens from people who seem hell-bent on causing trouble and committing crime. And like I said, we all pontificate when it doesn't come home. And let's hope it doesn't have to come home for you to appreciate what the government is doing. But a state of emergency was put in place. These young men were detained under the law, under the Constitution. We didn't detain everybody, and we don't believe that those who have been detained have gotten the message. So the government has decided to extend, by virtue of Parliament, for 2 more months, especially since we don't know what COVID-19 will bring, that will have our national security apparatus stretched thinner than it already is. We don't know if we may have to institute a curfew. We don't know if we may have to section off certain parts of the country to protect the rest of us from the pandemic. We don't know. Now, in the middle of all of that, you argue against the government, saying that we have enough issues already. Let's extend the state of emergency to ensure that people who are criminals remain out of our way while we deal with a problem and derivative problems from that major problem that is not the fault of anybody else's. You are going to argue against that? All of a sudden now you find and care about poverty? All of a sudden now you care about poor people? All of a sudden the PUP care? All of a sudden you talk about programs and suggestions and policies, none of which you ever developed when you were in government?
Attorney General, the writing that you did, you can't just say that.
But Mr. President,
they did not. No, they did not.
Mr. President.
I listened intently when Dr. Zabane was speaking. He did not say that.
Mr. President, I don't.
You may clarify just in relation to what you say that you were misquoted. I'm aware of the section of the law.
Section 33.
He has to clarify what I said. He said.
Yes.
Section 33(4).
No, you don't have to read. I'm familiar with the section.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Just in relation to
Yes.
what you're saying you were misquoted.
Yes, what the Attorney General said is that we, the PUP senators on this side, gave no suggestions, that we only stand up to pontificate, and that we have no suggestions. And so I want to clarify the suggestions, Mr. President, so that it's very clear what suggestions we gave, in case he maybe didn't hear it.
You can say that you did make suggestions. You
Yes.
can say, but the suggestions that you would have made would have been a matter of public record already, because you said it already.
Well, precisely so, Mr. President. So I want it to be very clear. We made some very clear suggestions, and the AG went ahead to even
Mr.
state
President,
that
it's only if I misquoted what he said.
Yes,
you misquoted me. You said that we didn't
Senators,
make suggestions.
senators, this is the problem
We made
when we
suggestions.
have, when you direct comments towards individual senators, because you open the door. If you direct comments towards an individual senator, the senator will want to respond.
And they never direct comments at me, Mr. President, individually.
Mr. President,
never.
and secondly, another point that he made referred to my Garifuna outfit. I asked you permission before
Yes, Senator.
to make some remarks in solidarity with our Garifuna people in Belize, Honduras, Guatemala, Nicaragua. I asked permission for that,
Yes, sir.
and then he attacks me on that. I have to stand up to defend that.
The clarification.
So,
We know
thank
the
you.
clarification.
Thank you, Mr.
I
President.
didn't attack him for it. I called him a hypocrite. I didn't attack him on
Senator, you cannot use language like that in the
they are
Senate.
President, that's
Mr.
outrageous, man. I have never insulted anybody on that
Senators,
side.
senators. This is the difficulty when there is references to individual senators. I listened to Dr. Zabane's entire presentation. I listened to it intently. There was no reference to any individual senator. Senator.
Mr. President, I rise to give my contribution to the period of public emergency in south side of Belize City, motion 2020. Mr. President, I want to begin by defining some terms here where it says youth, the time of life when one is young, especially the period between the childhood and maturity. Mr. President, and then I want to begin with a famous quote from the former Cuban president, and may he continue to rest in peace, Fidel Castro Ruz said once in his revolutionary speech to the young people in Cuba, if the young people fail, everything will fail. Mr. President, why I brought this is because I had the opportunity to be in Havana, Cuba, to study, Mr. President, for a period of 6 years. And when I was in Cuba, I knew very well that youths are the foundation of a nation. So, Mr. President, it's easier to be on the other side and to want to, how do I say it, suggestions, or want to point finger across on the other side or to this side. But that's not the case. There is a bigger work in front of all of us, Mr. President. And being on the other side is easier, like I said, to point finger. What is the solution? We question, what's the solution? What are we going to do? We can, every time we come to this honorable chamber, we come probably with a purpose. And the purpose is the business of the people. But some of us want to come here and become famous. It's not about famous. It is about us trying to solve, prevent. We know there's a situation, and it's not only in Belize. Crime not only exists in Belize, it exists all over the globe. It's just like this pandemic happening all over the world right now, Mr. President. So what do we do? What do we do? It's easier, like I said earlier. Come here, I want to point fingers and say, well, that government or this current administration is doing nothing to solve crime in Belize. And first of all, I want to salute all of those uniformed personnel that are working 24/7 across this country. And I salute all of them, Mr. President, for the work that they are doing. So I take that time to congratulate them on hard work under the stewardship, of course, the Honorable AG here as the Minister of National Security. So, Mr. President, when we come to this honorable chamber, we should remember that, yes, reality, we are facing many things. And as rightly said, the AG said it earlier, it seems that we have to remind them that probably in 1998, 2008, there was no crime in Belize. There was no poverty. But all of a sudden, there is crime and poverty. So, Mr. President, we should be mindful when we come to this honorable chamber that when we come here, Mr. President, we are doing the people's business. And as such, we should come with concrete suggestions and solutions how to solve these things. The Honorable Senator for the Churches said, and if I can say it, maybe echoed some of what he said, everything begins from the man above. Now got that in your life? You are nobody. You could be the king, you could be the queen, you could whosoever be. You know got God's side of you? You don't believe in God? You are nobody. Nobody. So, Mr. President, we should come to this honorable chamber and make concrete suggestions, as I said, how to solve this crime. What am I doing in my community? What am I doing in my area? In fact, what am I doing in my own very house to start to prevent crime? Oh, there is where a lot of us are failing, and we fail. And I'm saying this. I am saying this, Mr. President, because it's easier to come and say things and not even realize what we are saying sometimes. So when I was thinking here, sitting down, Mr. President, I realized that some of things we should do as citizens of this country, way to solve crime is, of course, I applaud the police department, the community, of doing neighborhood watch. That is an excellent initiative, Mr. President. Excellent initiative. We also have, the youths also want to have that spare time to do recreation. Well, we want to be involved. I remember when I was in that age, I want to be involved. I want to be there. I want to be there. And we are coming to say here, oh, because of poverty. In fact, my people, my family are one of the poorest people in this country. I come from one of the poorest family. I used to go to school with barefoot. I never used to have a school bag. I used to I used to carry my books under my shoulder, in my arms. We're poor. We're a third world country. Yet we want to come say about poverty and poverty and poverty and feel that people out there will buy what we're saying. Oh, Mr. President, and there have to be volunteer opportunity. Some of us are aspiring politicians, and even some of us in this honorable chamber are standard bearers in your own constituency. And yet you want to feel that just because you want to talk about poverty. No. Mr. President, I hope I should be disturbed. Just like other side are being given the opportunity, I should be given the opportunity to talk to. So, Mr. President, and one of the causes of crime in our society is negative family environments. We're living in those negative environments, and I agree to a certain extent when some honorable senators said that, yes, we may blame the mother and the father, but we need to realize as mother and father that we need to make solid decisions. We are raising a child. It's the responsibility of the mother and the father. It all begins within the home. Isn't that where it says charity begins at home? All begins at home. What are we doing as parents? Many of us, like the Honorable Pastor Rock had said, we're failing to certain extents. And that needs to be capitalized. That needs to be put on record that we, in our own family, must evaluate first before we can go out there and realize that we can. How many of us, I can recall a scenario here, Mr. President. I was at the market one morning, and a mother just walked to a child and started to use the obscene language that I have never heard in my life. And I said to the mother at that time, I said, that's not the right way to do things. That's not the right way to raise a child. Those words should not be given or used to this little child. Mr. President, where are those things anymore? What are we teaching our kids within the family? So there is where we're failing. So, Mr. President, and then I listened to the Honorable Senator mentioning that nothing has been done in Belize City. Nothing for the youths, nothing, nada, nothing. And he start by quoting, well, this, the Honorable Minister said and that. Yes, it's easier to quote anybody's speech. It's easier to do those things. But, Mr. President, in reality, is it in reality we're not doing nothing in Belize City? What about the Belize City Southside Literacy Development Program that are being offered to the youths outside of Belize City? What about the youths and the community transformation project in Southside of Belize City? You're telling me we're not doing nothing? Southside Youth Success Project, drop-in center serving in Belize City. The Southside Youth Success Projects. And we want to come here and say nothing has been done to the youths of Southside. Nothing, nada, nothing, zero. Why are we teaching our youths from Southside? No sporting facilities. Really? This current administration, as far as I can recall, if I can talk about my area in the Toledo district, I call it my area because I'm from the Toledo district. I have seen it, Mr. President. Now they have built auditorium in the town itself. Prior to none in the past current administration. Now we can't go and say that nothing has been done. Yes, we might want to come and say, well, the building of floors and all of those things does not reach out to the youths. It do in one way or the other. It do create part-time employment. And that's also a way to solve crime. So, Mr. President, there are many things that we still have on our shoulder to do. It's easier to say something and to want the people, them to buy it out there, but it all begins on what are we doing to solve this crime in this globe and in this pandemic that is affecting us in this country. So with that, Mr. President, thank you.
Senator Lizaraga.
Thank you. Mr. President,
Continue.
I honestly can say that I had no intention, absolutely no intention.
One second.
Mr. President, in accordance with Standing Order Number 10.8, I move that the proceedings on the order paper may be entered upon and proceeded with at this day's sitting at any hour, though opposed.
Honorable members, the question is that the proceedings on the order paper may be entered upon and proceeded with at this day's sitting at any hour, though opposed. All those in favor kindly say aye. Those against kindly say no. I think the ayes have it.
As I was saying, Mr. President, I had no intentions of getting into a long-winded debate on this thing today. As a matter of fact, I'm going to support it. Absolutely going to support it. I support the call from the Commissioner of Police to try and mitigate the circumstances that we face and this. Through these short-term measures. It was very disheartening for me to listen to my colleagues, especially one of them that started out, that made inferences about us calling or other senators calling for safety net for dogs. That was disgusting, really, and uncalled for. We weren't talking about dogs. We're talking about people. We're talking about human beings. I never call names, Mr. President.
He's directing at me, you know, Mr. President. He's directing at me.
I'm not directing.
Senators, we're going to get into this all day. The problem that we have, I find, in the Senate is when you make comments directed towards individual senators, because they will feel like they
I never
want
make it
to.
towards individual
Yes,
senators.
Mr. President.
Yes.
But it can't just be okay when they do it, but not okay when we do
No,
it.
no, it's not okay. It goes back to the genesis of the whole thing. If none of us do it, then we now have no problem. Senator.
Mr. President, the conversation from the government side stemmed around the fact that all of a sudden my colleagues care about poverty. All of a sudden we are talking about things that affect poverty. Well, Mr. President, perhaps if some people in this room would listen to us when we get up and talk about the importance of programs, the importance of reports, the importance of measurement mechanisms at budget time, the importance of all the things we say when we speak about the disbursement of funds, of measuring mechanisms, measuring tools, to see the effectiveness of those monies that we deploy for and on behalf of the people, and to see the real impact that that disbursement has had. If we would have listened, if we would have read, you would have seen that this exercise is not a today exercise. It has been an exercise for the last 12 years or more.
Point of order. Yes. What does that have to do with the debate? The budget presentation and estimates. What does that have to do with the state of emergency extension?
Mr. President, they say he who lives it.
Okay, but let it focus it on, because again, we're going to, if you make comments on what this
Mr.
one said and what that
President,
one said.
sometimes you have to correct things in a nice way. I'm trying to address all the issues that were raised. He who lives it feels it. I grew up on the south side of Belize City. I came from a very poor family. I have to live with 24 hours a day security. I know what it is to live in that environment. And I've been fighting, and I've been struggling, and I've been trying to improve that environment for years too. How many times people have questioned and asked me why I still have Southside Group of Companies or Southside Meats. Why do I associate myself with the word Southside? That's where I'm from. I'm proud of that fact. You know why, Mr. President? Because there are many hardworking, good people on the south side of Belize City that struggle and earn a living working hard every day. The unfortunate side of it is that we have allowed primarily, and this is the truth, for political purposes, a few bad apples on the south side of Belize City to rain havoc, because we know who they are and we've known who they were for years. And we've not addressed the problem, the root causes of crime over the years. I agree with the foreign minister totally in what he said. And it is unfortunate because today we have more representation in the National Assembly from the South Side than we've ever had. When I first moved to the South Side, there was one man from the South Side of the city sitting in the House of Representatives, Honorable Philip Golson, and we had less crime then in the South Side. We had one rep in this house. And I know that there were problems from then. And I know Mr. Golson well. He furnished me with the first location for my first business as a young man. He facilitated me having that place that he had so that I could open my first business. So I'm familiar with the struggles of the South Side. I've invested everything I have in the South Side. I too have had children born and raised in the South Side. We have contributed substantially to those schools and institutions in the South Side. So when I get up in here and talk about the things that affect poverty and crime, I live it. I feel it. It costs me. I have had my security guard robbed, shot in front of my wife and children. Do not tell me that if you don't have somebody that has been shot, you don't understand it. I understand it. I understand it. We today are in a situation where we have to put this band-aid. And I agree, I'm going to support it because we're bleeding. But we've been bleeding for a long time. And we fail for the surgery we have to do. We can't just compress it, because that's what we've been doing. Because you know what? Disturb nobody. Right? Because too many of us have too many people in all the divisions in Southside, and we have to protect them. Because they have family, they have this, they have that. That's the truth. That's the truth. And while we say we have programs, yes, we do have programs, but how effective are those programs? And when we question again at budget time, the efficiency and the reporting in the budget, so that we can measure the results. When we have papers that come to us that speak to those things and we don't read them and we can't debate them, and many of us don't read them, then we don't understand the complexity.
Mr. President, I believe he needs to apologize. He cannot appoint for me, Mr. President.
Senator.
Why you read man, which man you try to say I don't read? You need to apologize, Mr. President. And we know you talk about budget, yes? We talk about the state of emergency in Southside Belize City.
Senator.
Come on, man.
Senator,
Mr. President, we have to be fair and flex.
Senator, all senators need to be respectful in their comments and replies to senators.
So, Mr. President, it's important that we read. It's important that we understand what we read. Because it's all interconnected, you know. This nation building, that no one's band-aid solution here, band-aid solution there, knee-jerk here, knee-jerk there. They're all interconnected. And unless we can make that linkage between wasteful spending, between the lack of strong oversight institutions, we talk about Singapore, that was their strength. The strength of their institutions, yes, they have a mano duro, yes, they have strong laws, and they enforce them, but it was those institutions that should take care of that enforcement that were given the independence and the strength. And never the politicians. Thank goodness Lee Kuan Yew saw the wisdom in that. Strengthen your institutions. Pay your public service well. And make them independent. Those were the key elements of the Singapore experience. Right? So, all of it is interconnected. Yes, it is unfortunate that COVID has brought a lot of this to the forefront. It has exposed the many areas that we are weak, that we've been weak for a long time, that we've neglected, ignored. And yes, we have to take steps to curb the senseless, brutal killing. Yes, we have to take steps to stop this wave of crime that we've allowed. By a few people in our society. We've been hijacked. The peace and tranquility of the South Side that I knew. I used to walk home. I used to have a girlfriend on the North Side. I used to walk home 2, 3 in the morning, safe. Walk home. Go to Majestic and go to Palace. Carry home the girl and walk home after that. Me one. Safe. The only thing we used to frighten me, there's some big Charlie Price used to sit on the street. So I know what has happened in Southside. And it's not today that I've been saying it. Way back. I can remember I had a conversation, serious conversation with a previous Prime Minister, and I said, look, we need to take care of our youths. We need to address this problem now. And I was so disappointed when that Prime Minister said to me, we can't do nothing for them, but we have to deal with the next generation. And that is what has hurt us. So when I listen to the Foreign Minister get up and say that these are our children of the last 12 years, it's true. It's true. We have failed them. We have failed them. I'm not going to justify, because there are many reasons, and many of my colleagues touched on the many reasons that lead to crime. And we have to address them, and they're complicated issues, and they're complex issues. But opportunity, the lack of opportunity is one of them. The lack of role models. Are we in these chambers role models? The way we behave in here, the way we behave in the House of Representatives, is that the image that we want to portray to these young people? When you have differences of opinions, is that the way we want to teach them? How to deal with them? How to deal with your differences? No, man. We have to learn to listen. We have to learn to listen to those that have differing views from us. And if those views are good views, apply them. Not criticize them. Not shoot them down because they're critical or they're suggesting that there are other ways to do things. And that is a travesty. That is the travesty of the last 12 years. Is that everything becomes so personal. And the foreign minister is right. We're plagued by poverty. We're plagued by ignorance. And we have a tremendous lack of capacity and opportunity in our young people. How many new Belizean businesses have we seen on the south side of Belize City? On the contrary, certainly in my neighborhood, most of the, make we say, 5 or 6 block square around me, the Belizean businesses have been closing down. And you see a boom of opportunity for people from abroad, non-Belizean. And those are things the young people of the south side could be doing. We can teach them how to cook. We can teach them how to care for a store. And we've been saying this. But nobody listens. Nobody cares, it seems. And fixing the problems would require more than just short-term band-aid fixes and knee-jerk measures. We have to get that. Our solutions have to be results-based. And I agree with somebody else said earlier. We have to be able to see what is working, what is not, changing, adapting. And we have to apply our own Belizean solutions. But it has to be human-centered. And it has to be livelihood-centered. For young Belizean people, we spend, I've said it in here, 25% of our budget on education. And then what opportunities do we, 27%, thank you. Then what are we doing to provide opportunities for these people to apply that education? What space are we providing for them? And that's why, Mr. President, we are where we are today. And that's why, Mr. President, we keep harping on it every opportunity we have, because we live it. We feel it. We pay for it. We've paid for it in money and in blood. Mr. President, I've said before in this House that COVID has presented us with an opportunity to begin to do things the right way. For us to learn and come together, listen, and find solutions. But we have to be open. We have to be willing to listen. Because all of us can learn. All of us can learn. The rebirth and the rebuilding of our nation, Mr. President, will take all hands on deck. And we need to grasp this as leaders. We need to understand this, that everybody in this country has to contribute and has to be productive. We have to instill in our people the dignity of work. And we have to bring to them true example. We have to present role models to them. How to be productive. We have to show them, rather than giving them a fish mentality, teach them to fish. I know it's an old cliche, but it is so true. And it becomes even more important today when we have scarce, and we will have even scarcer resources in the months to come. So it is critical that the programs that we do have, that they produce, and they produce good results. And that we're able to measure those results, analyze the results, apply best practices, read, apply the science, listen to the social sciences. There's a lot to be learned from the mistakes of other countries. There's sufficient studies and programs that have good track records. So we have to learn, man. We have to listen, and we have to stop this confrontation. And our spending has to be priority, people-centered right now. We have to build capacity so that we can become more competitive and more productive, and that takes hard work. That takes people that are willing to learn and to read and to listen and to study and to do their homework and listen again and consult. We need to stop this thing that we have all the solutions, ourselves, or because I'm minister of this or I'm minister that I know all the answers. No, you don't. So, Mr. President, it is a travesty, yes, that over the last 12 years, perhaps poverty has risen. We don't know because we haven't had any recent numbers. Certainly when you look at the numbers that float around by those institutions that do measure crime, we know that we rank very close to some of the most crime-ridden countries, We're all the way on top when it comes to that. And that has to be concerning. But the good news is, it seems the Commissioner of Police knows, for the most part, who these people are and have taken them off the street. So we're going to support that. We support the work of the good, hard-working policemen. We thank the Minister for his leadership as well in this. I'm going to thank him. But to address this matter is something we should have been doing a long time ago, and this is not the end-all, cure-all, fix-all. This has to be but the beginning, and we have to make serious strides now to put into place those things, whatever we have to put into place, to make our society safe and productive again. Because that becomes even more critical, more crucial now with COVID. And we have to learn to be productive from wherever we are. From our homes, from our backyard, whatever we are doing, whatever the confines are of our being able to survive, to live, we have to be able to produce from that environment. And we have to start instilling in this, Senator Smith, in our kids at school too. You have to teach them now to produce things. And we have to focus our education on that. So that, Mr. President, I'm going to take this with opportunity with your permission. I was sharing with you before the session about how proud I was of this young lady in Dangriga that set up a stall on the side of the street and was selling. Young entrepreneur, probably 5 or 6 years old, with the support of her parents, of course, and her family. And this is what we need to instill in our young children. The ability for us to help ourselves. The ability for us to generate value for money. Right? Not to be just begging. Because that young child, having had that experience from an early age, can apply it along the way and will have no need to turn to a life of crime or a life of dependency. That young lady is learning to be independent. So you don't have to depend on no man to take care of himself. And that is what we need. We need to teach people to be independent. We need to empower them and give them the opportunity, not lip service, but real opportunity, and create the space for them to be able to grow into. Not take away the space or stifle the space And then after they come out of high school, they don't have nothing for them because we've not created any space for them to grow into. And those things that they could easily do, we've given them to foreigners. That is going to hurt us for many, 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 many decades to come. That travesty. Mr. President, I thank you for your patience, and I thank you for allowing me to speak when I had promised you that I wasn't going to. But I thought it necessary for me to put in my 2 cents, because we have good people in the South Side. I'm from the South Side, so don't think everybody that's outside bad. No, none at all. We have hardworking mothers, single fathers, right? Who get up and work every day, and we have a small bunch of people, politicians and criminals, that have allowed the South Side to get a bad name. And that is a travesty. That is a travesty. It's a shame that when we had one member sitting in this house from the South Side, we had less crime than when we have all those ministers now in this parliament from the South Side. Travesty. Because one would have thought that when you send people to this house, you don't get the resources, you don't get the opportunities, we create the space for the people that's outside to improve their lives, their livelihoods, and we have not seen that. And I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that. Everything we see and read point to that. So it's an opportunity for us as leaders, as parliamentarians, and I send this message to future parliamentarians, that the investments that we make through our legislative might in these chambers has to be now more than ever totally focused on people's lives and livelihoods, their safety, the common good. We can't continue to just have a few of us in this country prosper because of who we know in these chambers, and the rest of us are left out. And the rest of us are left to fend on our own, or to beg for crumbs from the public purse. That can't be the formula. That can't be a formula that any government would be proud of. That can't be a legacy that you would want to leave. So over the years, yes, we have gotten up and we have pontificated, in the words of my colleagues. And apparently most of the seeds have fallen on deaf ears and on unfertile ground. And that is a travesty. That is a travesty, because we believe that we have contributed a lot of significant research, a lot of meaningful debate, a lot of helpful commentary. Right? And those that I represent want to see a successful Belize, a crime-free Belize, because we have all our investments here. So we will support anything that speaks to lowering crime, making Belize a more attractive investment destination, a more attractive tourism destination. We want people to come and visit and invest in our country. But that has to have a meaningful impact on our people, on our citizenry as well. You know, I listened and I heard somebody say, Mr. President, that we need to do this because of terrorists. We have terrorists in our midst. And I remember here, we sat down and debated some crime legislation. I think it was the latest we'd ever gone, well into the night, discussing all of these new measures that we were going to be putting into place that empowered the law enforcement officials to take terrorists and gang members off the streets and give them heavy penalties and heavy jail time. So my question is, why didn't we apply those pieces of legislation? Because you could go to jail for 10 years or 15 years, I don't remember, and you could be charged some hefty sums just for displaying gang signs, markings, whatever. And certainly if you were going to be labeled a terrorist, that would attract immediately that would attract jail time or heavy. Well, less crime, no? I mean, a lot less crime. It was draconian, even. It was draconian, even. So we have the laws. We have the laws. The question is, do we have the will? Do we have the will for put into place the long-term things? All the long-term things we need to address this scourge of crime. Or are we just going to continue with the Band-Aid fixes? Thank you, Mr. President.
Dr. Bonner.
Yes, please. Mr. President, I won't be long at all. I just, a lot has been said. And I just wanted to make two short points. Of course, I support this motion. That goes without saying almost. But there's an underlying conversation that's taking place that is suggesting that poverty is the cause of crime. And I don't know, and I'm speaking probably as a social scientist. Poverty doesn't cause crime. When I was a child, we had more people who were poor than you have now. That's a reality, that's the truth. If you go back in our time, the poverty rate has come down from historical highs. Crime has increased at the same time. Poverty doesn't cause crime. There is a link that may be found in many places between poverty and crime, but that is not by definition a causal link. It is not by definition a causal link. Because somebody is poor does not mean they're a criminal. We've heard that said many times, but sometimes we've heard the opposite. Well, you know, certain parts of Belize City, and no. Historically, in our country, and for those of you who are students of history, you would know that the poorest district from way back in colonial times has been the Toledo district. The Toledo district has had the lowest levels of investment from time. That is the truth. They've had the lowest number of teachers per student, the lowest numbers of doctors and nurses per student, the lowest amount of roads per square. That is the truth. But Toledo district also has the lowest crime rate. So somebody needs to look at our society more carefully. Stop this discussion about poverty causing crime, because that leads to expectations too. If you expect that that's where it will happen, that's where it will. We have to understand the particular circumstances of where poverty is not linked with crime and where poverty may be linked with crime, and then maybe we can come up with some understandings, maybe from our history, maybe from the way we are currently organized. I don't know. I'm not going to make any suggestions about it right now, but all I'm saying is that this situation that we're in ought not to be interpreted solely as a situation of poverty being linked with crime, because it is not necessarily the case that poverty causes crime. I don't think there's ever a study that's shown that it's caused it. Only the links can be seen. Links meaning you find a certain amount of crime when you find a certain amount of poverty, but there isn't necessarily a link there. In fact, the studies might tell you that the crime leads to poverty and not the other way around. And therefore, we have to be very careful about how we interpret and how we tell people what their expectations ought to be because of where they happen to live, where they happen to grow up, because that does not help the situation. We need to do it in a more, yes, information-driven way, meaning doing the research that is necessary, and not only research that's in a particular community, but research to understand why in a community it may work one way, but in another community it may not work in that same way. So that's a word of caution and a word of request to the social scientists coming up, to the universities to study, to really help us to understand why it is that poverty in the Toledo district did not lead to crime, but in the Belize district it did, if that's what we're saying is the relationship. And the other point that I would want to make, because oftentimes we hear criticisms about the level of infrastructure spending. Infrastructure spending is a fundamental tool in economic theory to drive economic growth. I'm not going to even push that. In the great United States, for example, Barack Obama had been pushing for infrastructure spending as a way to build the basis for sustained economic growth and all of that in their republic. So it's not, I'm not going to make that argument, but what I will say is that when we talk about spending millions on a road, it's not as if we go to a shop, buy a road and come and put it on the ground. It doesn't work that way. You hire people. You hire people. People get jobs when we build roads. People get jobs when there's construction taking place. And when you do that, and people have jobs, they go home with money in their pockets and can feed their children. That's how the cycle turns over. There's a particular project in Belize City that I like to call attention to. It's the first stage of the reconstruction of the embankment of the Collet Canal. I don't know how many people are aware of how that was done. I don't think my friends at Cisco Construction will mind if I call their names, but they led on that project. It was a infrastructure project. Infrastructure, when it includes labor-intensive ways, make infrastructure more expensive to execute. That is by definition. If you bring in a tractor to move it, or you pay 10 men, you pay the 10 men more than you would pay the tractor. That's the reality of construction most of the time. But what they did with that project is they hired a lot of young men from the South Side, brought them in, put them to work, and as it turned out, they are excellent workers. This issue about the South Side young men not wanting to work, can't work, lazy, that project proved to me that that is not necessarily an assumption that holds water. The young men came out, they worked, they did a fair share of work for the day, for the wages they got for the day, they were responsible. There is no great pilferage of no tools and equipment. It worked well, and the reason why it could work well is because of the way it was structured, the way it was managed, the expectations that were made of the people who were working, and the clear expressions of appreciation for the quality of the work that they were doing. If you look at that work that was done, it was, I mean, there's no difference between it and any other project. It's an excellent quality project. So the other thing we have to stop doing is assuming that because people come out of the South Side, they're lazy, ineffective, they can't do their work. It is just not so, and we have to stop saying it. We have to stop expecting it and understand that when there's a job and there's somebody from the South Side and somebody from the North, don't look at where they're coming from. Look at their capabilities and be willing to hire from wherever. There are companies in this country who pay wages that are so low that Belizeans will not work for that because that's not our way. We didn't do it, and I can't say it any than that. But then we have companies, these same companies, applying for ton loads of work permits to bring in people from the neighboring countries who come in and work for half. Why? Because of the conditions under which they will work that our people stopped from the time they came out of the forest. We have to understand that there are issues we need to talk about, we need to work out, we need to research in order to be able to understand the link between poverty, crime, location, why it is in a particular area there isn't any link to be seen between crime and poverty, and why we may think we see that in other areas, because if we don't do that broad range of review of our history and of our present, we won't be finding the solutions at all. Mr. President, I support this bill. This motion, it is not intended to be a solution to either poverty or crime. It is not saying that that's what it's trying to do. It is trying to give the police department, the Ministry of National Security, a context in which they can deal with a problem right now when there are a range of other problems that also need their attention. It's not the best way, but it's the way we have to go at this time. Thank you very much.
I recognize the Leader of Government Business.
Mr. President, I could rise to just say I move the motion, but I want to just say a few words here. First of all, I want to thank all the senators for their presentation, but I want to go back to the first senator who spoke, and that is my good colleague, Honorable Reverend Senator Rock. There are a couple little adages, that proverbs, if you like, that I want to highlight. One, Mr. President, is it takes a village to raise the child. And the other one, I think, is from Timothy. And I won't be specific, 6-something-1, I think, where it says the root of all evil is money. Love of money. Love is the root of the evil. And why I highlight those? Because, Mr. President, if I may call some names with your permission, but they are in a good way, in a good way. May I start with you, whose mother I knew well, who taught at St. Ignatius? The center of the South Side. Hardworking, disciplined, task mistress. You could not step out of line, nor could your brother. Task mistress. If I may speak of the Honorable Aldo Salazar, whose wife is the daughter of a village boy, whose father was dirt poor, hammering out a little living in a village of Isabella. I think he had about 13 children, and across the little Picado was my father-in-law with the same amount of children. Poor as dirt. No government assistance, no boost, no pantry, no nothing. And in that family, the least educated has a bachelor's degree. How we explain that? And if I may also speak of the Attorney General, whose father carved and sang, and mother was a serious task mistress. And of course, I too grew up, and I won't talk about my history, it's too long and too boring, as they would say. But one thing I knew, Mr. President, the center of that was discipline in the home. That was the center. And the village raising the child. So much so that when I left my house, if I did anything wrong between that house and St. Ignatius School, when I got home in the evening, there was hell to pay. Because the story of my wrongdoing and misdeeds reached home before me. My dad would say, so you upstart to Mr. So-and-so, are you so-and-so? And that was an amazing thing. We lost that. We lost that. We lost process, Mr. President. Process. And we got into instant product and gratification. When I was a kid, to eat a fried chicken, raise the chicken, hatch the chicken, raise the chicken, feed the chicken, kill the chicken, pick the chicken, swinge the feather, pick the chicken, guts the chicken, fry it with coconut oil from the coconut you raise, which you have to grater and make into coconut oil, hooks, chip, grater, coconut oil, you get a little malt and so, and you have your oil for fried chicken. Process. Today it's a dollar fried chicken product. But what gets even bigger? The other thing I want to say to you, we grew up, all of us in this room, get a good education and get a good job. Big mistake. Big mistake. Because it creates the expectation of this good job. In 1995, my now deceased friend Bert Tucker, Dr. Young, myself, Mr. Boyne, Dr. Yvonne Goff, we had a little dialogue in August. And this was in the village of Bermudan Landing. We were sitting there, here are all of us with master's degrees and whatnot, well educated. And I said, we just threw it out one evening. Where is the good job? How can you ask your poor mom and your poor dad who send their picnic for school and they do everything to make sure you get this good education and then you will come back and palar? So I am back now. Where is the good job? Where is the good job? And so I now got the good job, so I go to the States where the good job is. Or I go to England where the good job is. And that happened. It never dawned on us that it was our responsibility with this education to create this investment and this job and put it together. Talking about Singapore, that's what Lee Kuan Yew did with the group of 7. You guys are engineers, managers, financiers, create the project. That is where we lack. Create. How many people, and my good friend Honorable Dr. Zabane, who ran Galen, will tell you how many students graduate from the business course. Where is the job they create? Then they wait for the job. No, man. Create the job. Package it. Put it together. That's the innovation. That's the other missing link. And then I'll go to the other point. We work outside our culture. My colleague here, Honorable Dr. Barnett, just mentioned it. What is that culture? I ran a huge farm, and I knew on that farm that the Latin and the Mayan people will work in the field. No problem. The Creole people, for the most part, will not. There's a history to that. Why we don't mess with agriculture? But those boys work in the mill and in the mechanic shop. You couldn't get them harder working in the mill, milling rice, packaging, etc. They work on construction. Nobody could beat them. That's a cultural thing, man. We took people from Hattieville and brought them into that farm, right at mile 25, and put them in the field, and they last one day. One day. John Woods, my good, now deceased colleague from Cisco, took a bunch and we took them to Citrus. The last one day too. I used to machete and boots and this and that. That's fact. So when he decided that he's going to do the Chakamal Street by hand, so that these guys would be working in construction, they'd get some money and be tired in the night, and then they don't got no time for crime. Just look at that example and see how it worked. Because he and I worked originally on the infrastructure project in Belize, where they dug the ditches by hand to put down all the pipes, as the Senator just said. That's the benefit of the construction project. I can tell you right now, no matter how we knock it, man, if you go to the coastal road, there is, I think, 287 people working there. I know that because my daughter is doing the social impact something she's doing there. That's what she's doing. 200 and odd people working there. That's how that go. So you can't work outside your culture. You can't expect those people on the south side to get into our culture, even though there's a big void there. Senator is right. We bring a lot of people from across the border. A lot. But the people here won't do that work. So you have to continue, to find processes. And it's a challenge. But it goes back to the fundamental. It takes the village. And that is also in the school. My colleague, Senator Elena, will know that when she was a little girl, definitely when I was, and I guess I'm a shade older than she is, but no joke when sisters spank you, you know, or when they no go home. I remember one time I went home and I got all kind of things for sick of me upstart, and I just tell off Miss put on good one for me. When I got home, I look for me, he say, I don't know about no crazy teacher in a school. But he spanked me again for being upstart and rude. Today, you ain't even there talk, because the whole barrage will come down on you. You see a child doing something wrong on the street, you don't dare correct. Man, we have to go back to that too. I don't know, I know they talk nonsense. That's how we grew up. That's why we are how we are. I don't know one of we in here that grew up in any rich family. If I may, with due respect to Dr. Zabani, he has a couple of friends that came from Dangwiga. Dangwiga is not a rich part of the country. You have Dr. Zabani right there. You had Dr. Aaron Lewis. You had Dr. Arlie Peters. You had Dr. I think he was Martin, I can't remember his name. All people from those years, PhDs. Poor, struggling family. In the village of Isabella, I referred to Senator Aldo Salazar's father-in-law. Engineers, teachers, all sorts of people. You couldn't be poorer than them. Paddle one dory down to Belize City for bringing them produce. During hurricane time, no Nemo, no nothing exists. So explain to me. So we have to stop flagging this thing that, oh, that because I'm poor than a criminal or because get back to the fundamentals. And that is a responsibility of every single one of us. Because there's a widening divide between the social responsibility we had and now the capital. Money to everything. The love of money is everything. I said, get a good education, because you know what my boys told me? My children told me when they were small, Daddy, you know, some of their friends who dropped out of high school, tell them, boss, you know, the waste time, you know. When you get a job, what kind of money you want to get? $50 a day? I can make $100 in 5 minutes. They sell drugs, they hustle, they do something else. That is the sad thing. When the cruise ships began to come, I was shocked one day when my wife pointed out to me that there were a number of girls who, whenever the first ships came, they missed class. I said, what are they going on here? They're sick. And they begin to investigate that, and guess what happened? It was a kind of ring of very sad and distasteful prostitution. As you could go visit the cruise ship and you're an escort, they call it, and you make a good amount of money. So a legal now, they make $200 for escort. Why she needs to study and pass any exam and burn the midnight oil so she could get my education and get a good job. That instant gratification, that money. And a lot of parents too would encourage it too silently. When we were small, there was a thing called a kunku pencil. You don't know, I'm sure you don't. You take your pencil and you cut it in a tree, and you bring a leaf hole and you put a string and it's around your neck, kunku pencil. And one day I went home with an extra kunku pencil, and my father said, you get that boy? I said, well, boy, give me. My pastor said to my ma, he said, girl, he said, then give you a kunku pencil, I go and go get mine in the morning, because I need one too. I've told this story 1,000,000 times. The next morning, you know what he did? He walked me right down to St. Ignatius. And he stooped down, he said, oh, my son, he said, when I go up there, and I asked that boy, I hope he says yes. He says, because if it says no, what that make you? I don't know. He said, that make you a thief, and everybody will know that. He might be a liar, but you're a thief. Well, my thing was, I mean, I beat the hell out of him, but when we got up there, the kid did say so. My pastor said, hold your pencil, man. He said, all we poor. Poor, that be what he used to. And when we come downstairs, he said, he asked the teacher, he said, look, my son, in life, anything you get one piece of paper, that one receipt. Make sure that you could justify everything you got. You want to look in at my bag? I could show you receipts for 1964. Everything I get one receipt, no care where I buy. Because ain't nobody going to come accuse me I get nothing illicit or otherwise. And when people are out there buying stolen goods, and when people are out there beating the system, what do you think we contribute to? We might benefit, but we contribute, man, because we want we Gucci bag, and we want we Coach bag, and we want this, and we want we Rolex. Come on, man. So, Mr. President, to wind this up quickly, this simply sets out to arrest the problem that Senator Lizarraga talked about on the south side, and I go up there, and lots of us go up there, because it's invasive. But we have to arrest the greed. We have to get back to the social responsibilities and the norms and ethics that we all grew up with. If we can find a way to get back to that, we can solve this problem. It will not be solved by capital, by just dumping money, because it gets worse and worse and worse and worse. And until we learn not to put we hat higher than we could reach, and more fundamentally, to be satisfied with a good, comfortable way of life, and not always be wanting something and beating down the next one. That whole greed cycle, when we get away from that, we'll be good to go. I move the motion.
Honorable members, that motion is referred to the Constitution and Foreign Affairs Committee for examination, consideration, and report.
Bills for second reading.
I recognize the Leader of Government Business.
Immigration Amendment Bill 2020. Mr. President, I rise to move the second reading of a bill for an act to amend the Immigration Act, Chapter 156 of the Substantive Laws of Belize, Revised Edition 2011, to expand the duties of immigrants entering Belize and to provide for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto. Mr. President, this bill, accompanied by the following two, sets out to set in motion in the substantive laws provisions so that statutory instruments, regulations can be made by the respective ministers with the approval of cabinet to be able to contain any issue that may arise from people coming into Belize as a result of this whole COVID-19. In other words, to give strength to our capacity to police in a way, if you can use that word, people who are coming, they may have difficulty, people may want to challenge some of the restrictions we are putting into place. This is the purpose of this, both the immigration and the two that follows.
Honorable members, the question is that the bill for an act to amend the Immigration Act, Chapter 156 of the Substantive Laws of Belize, Revised Edition 2011, to expand the duties of immigrants entering Belize and to provide for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto, be read a second time. All those in favor, kindly say aye.
Aye.
Those against, kindly say no. I think the ayes have it.
Bill for an act to amend the Immigration Act, Chapter 156 of the Substantive Laws of Belize, Revised Edition 2011, to expand the duties of immigrants entering Belize and to provide for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto.
I recognize the Leader of Government Business.
Hotel and Tourist Accommodation Amendment Number 2, Bill of 2020. Mr. President, I rise to move the second reading of a bill for an act to amend the Hotels and Tourist Accommodation Act, Chapter 285 of the Substantive Laws of Belize, Revised Edition 2011, to provide for the Minister to make regulations in the interest of public safety, public order, and public health if there is the threat of outbreak of an infectious disease, and to provide for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto. Again, Mr. President, in the same vein like the previous bill.
Honorable members, the question is that the bill for an act to amend the Hotels and Tourist Accommodation Act, Chapter 285 of the Substantive Laws of Belize, Revised Edition 2011, to provide for the minister to make regulations in the interest of public safety, public order, and public health if there is the threat or outbreak of an infectious disease, and to provide for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto, be read a second time. All those in favor kindly say aye. Aye. Those against kindly say no. I think the ayes have it.
Bill for an act to amend the Hotel and Tourist Accommodation Act, Chapter 285 of the Substantive Laws of Belize, Revised Edition 2011, to provide for the minister to make regulation in the interest of public safety, public order, public health, if there is a threat or outbreak of an infectious disease, and to provide for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto.
I recognize the Leader of Government Business.
Quarantine Amendment Bill 2020. Mr. President, I rise to move the second reading of a bill for an act to amend the Quarantine Act, Chapter 41 of the Substantive Laws of Belize, Revised Edition of 2011, to empower the minister to declare the whole or any part of Belize to be an area inflicted by or under the threat of an infectious disease, and to provide for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto.
I recognize Senator Salas.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. I support this bill and the previous two, but on the Quarantine Amendment Bill, I have two questions. I would like to hear clarification. Just asking if it was intentional. I see there in the amendment, there are two subsections that were in the 2011 Act that were not included. And again, I would just like to know if that was intentional and if that in any way affects the bill. The sections I'm referring to is what was previously, or what is in the 2011 Act, Section 4, subsection 3, that reads, regulations made under subsection 1 of this section shall not have any force or effect until confirmed by resolution of the National Assembly and in confirming any regulations, the National Assembly may make any amendments thereto which it may deem desirable. So that is being left out of this amendment. And again, I would like to know if that was intentional, if that weakens the bill in any way. And secondly, the 2011 Act had reference to the first and second schedules. It reads, the regulations contained in the first and second schedules shall be deemed to have been made and confirmed under this section. So the first schedule refers to the quarantine maritime regulations, and the second schedule refers to the quarantine air regulations. This also has been left out of this amendment. And again, I'm asking if that was intentional or if that affects this in any way. We need to ensure that this cannot be successfully challenged by anyone for whatever reason, because it is a very important amendment that we are trying to pass here. Those are my two questions on that. Thank you.
I recognize the Leader of Government Business.
President, the AG is not here, but the standard principle, I think our colleagues will agree that when you amend an act, what is not amended remains and sustains in the principal act. So I think in response to what the Honorable Senator has asked, that portion of the regulations that is not being amended sustains.
I will allow you to make a clarification in terms of your question, because I think you...
Yes, very quickly. I raised it because this Section 4 repeals and replaces the Section 4 under 2011. So, yes, as I was saying, Mr. President, the amendment repeals and replaces the entire section under which what I read fall under.
And then also, Senator, we can, as the clerk pointed out, we can clear that up in the committee of the whole Senate.
Move the question.
Honorable members, the question is that the bill for an act to amend the Quarantine Act, Chapter 41 of the Substantive Laws of Belize, Revised Edition 2011, to empower the minister to declare the whole or any part of Belize to be an area inflicted by or under the threat of an infectious disease, and to provide for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto, be read a second time. All those in favor kindly say aye. Aye. Those against kindly say no. I think the ayes have it.
The bill for an act to amend the Quarantine Act, Chapter 41 of the Substantive Laws of Belize, Revised Edition 2011, to empower the minister to declare the whole or any part of Belize to be an area inflicted by or under the threat of an infectious disease, and to provide for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto.
I recognize the Leader of Government Business.
Electronic Transactions Amendment Bill 2020. Mr. President, I rise to move the second reading of a bill for an act to amend the Electronic Transaction Act, Chapter 22903 of the Substantive Laws of Belize, Revised Edition 2011, to promote the development of the legal and business infrastructure necessary to implement secure electronic commerce to better facilitate electronic filing of documents with public bodies, and to promote efficient delivery by public bodies of services by means of reliable electronic records, and to provide for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto.
I recognize Senator Shabat.
Mr. President, just a few observations. First of all, I want to say that I do support this amendment. I think this is a piece of legislation whose time has come. Certainly though, Mr. President, I would want to see that this be extended, especially to the services being offered by the Vital Statistics Unit. There are so many people across this country who have hardships in traveling to obtain birth certificates, marriage certificates, death certificates, and the like. And so if this could be extended to facilitate that service to the Belizean public, I think it would go a long way. Thanks, Mr. President.
I recognize the Leader of Government
I move
Business.
the question.
Okay. Honorable members, the question is that the bill for an act to amend the Electronic Transactions Act, Chapter 229.03 of the Substantive Laws of Belize, Revised Edition 2011, to promote the development of the legal and business infrastructure necessary to implement secure electronic commerce to better facilitate electronic filing of documents with public bodies and to promote efficient delivery by public bodies of services by means of reliable electronic records and to provide for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto be read a second time. All those in favor kindly say aye. Those against kindly say no. I think the ayes have it.
The bill for an act to amend the Electronic Transaction Act, Chapter 22903 of the Substantive Laws of Belize, Revised Edition 2011, to promote the development of the legal and business infrastructure necessary to implement secure electronic commerce, to better facilitate electronic filing of documents with public bodies, and to promote efficient delivery by public bodies of services by means of reliable electronic record. Committee of the Whole Senate on Motion and Bill.
Honorable members, in accordance with Standing Order 68A, the Senate will now resolve itself into the Constitution and Foreign Affairs Committee, a committee of the whole Senate, to consider the motion referred to it, and thereafter, in accordance with Standing Order 54, the committee of the whole Senate to consider the bills that were read a second time. Honorable members, I will now take the chair as the chairman of the Constitution and Foreign Affairs Committee, and then as the chair of the committee of the whole Senate. No money. Thanks.
Public business, government business, motion.
I recognize the leader of government business.
Period of public emergency in the south side of Belize City declared by proclamation of the Governor General. Motion 2020. Mr. President, the Constitution and Foreign Affairs Committee has met and considered the period of public emergency in the south side of Belize City declared by proclamation of the Governor General. Motion 2020, and has agreed that it be returned back to the Senate for adoption. I therefore move that the question be put.
Honorable members, the question is, now therefore be it resolved that this honorable House, being satisfied that a period of public emergency persists in the part of Belize consisting of the part of Belize City known as the South Side, as specified in the schedule to Statutory Instrument 97 of 2020, hereby extends the period of public emergency in the part of Belize consisting of the part of Belize City known as the South Side, as specified in the schedule to Statutory Instrument 97 of 2020, for a further period of 2 months. All those in favor kindly say aye. Those against kindly say no. I think the ayes have it.
Reporting and third reading of bills.
I recognize the leader of government business.
Immigration Amendment Bill 2020. Mr. President, I rise to report that the Committee of the Whole Senate has considered the Immigration Amendment Bill 2020 and passed it without amendment. I now move that that bill be read a third time.
Honorable members, the question is that the bill for an act to amend the Immigration Act, Chapter 156 of the Substantive Laws of Belize, Revised Edition 2011, to expand the duties of immigrants entering Belize and to provide for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto, be read a third time. All those in favor, kindly say aye. Aye. Those against, kindly say no. I think the ayes have it.
Bill for an act to amend the Immigration Act, Chapter 156 of the Substantive Laws of Belize, Revised Edition 2011, to expand the duties of immigrants entering Belize and to provide for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto.
I recognize the leader of government business.
Hotels and Tourist Accommodation Amendment Number 2, Bill of 2020. Mr. President, I rise to report that the Committee of the Whole Senate has considered the Hotels and Tourist Accommodation Amendment Bill Number 2, Bill of 2020, and passed it without amendment. I now move that that bill be read a third time.
Honorable members, the question is that the bill for an act to amend the Hotels and Tourist Accommodation Act, Chapter 285 of the Substantive Laws of Belize, Revised Edition 2011, to provide for the minister to make regulations in the interest of public safety, public order, and public health if there is the threat or outbreak of an infectious disease, and to provide for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto, be read a third time. All those in favor, kindly say aye. All those against, kindly say no. I think the ayes have it.
The bill for an act to amend the Hotel and Tourist Accommodation Act, Chapter 285 of the Substantive Laws of Belize, Revised Edition 2011, to provide for the minister to make regulation in the interest of public safety, public order, public health, if there is a threat or outbreak of an infectious disease, and to provide for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto.
I recognize the leader of government business.
Quarantine Amendment Bill 2020. Mr. President, I rise to report that the Committee of the Whole Senate has considered the Quarantine Amendment Bill 2020 and passed it without amendment. I now move that that bill be read a third time.
Honorable members, the question is that the bill for an act to amend the Quarantine Act, Chapter 41 of the Substantive Laws of Belize, Revised Edition 2011, to empower the minister to declare the whole or any part of Belize to be an area inflicted by or under the threat of an infectious disease, and to provide for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto, be read a third time. All those in favor kindly say aye. Aye. Those against kindly say no. I think the ayes have it.
The bill for an act to amend the Quarantine Act, Chapter 41 of the Substantive Law of Belize, Revised Edition 2011, to empower the minister to declare the whole or any part of Belize to be an area inflicted by or under the threat of an infectious disease, and to provide for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto.
I recognize the Leader of Government Business.
Electronic Transaction Amendment Bill 2020. Mr. President, I rise to report that the Committee of the Whole Senate has considered the Electronic Transactions Amendment Bill of 2020 and passed without amendment. I now move that the bill be read a third time.
Honorable members, the question is that the bill for an act to amend the Electronic Transactions Act, Chapter 229.03 of the Substantive Laws of Belize, Revised Edition 2011, to promote the development of the legal and business infrastructure necessary to implement secure electronic commerce, to better facilitate electronic filing of documents with public bodies, and to promote efficient delivery by public bodies of services by means of reliable electronic records, and to provide for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto, be read a third time. All those in favor kindly say aye. Aye. Those against kindly say no. I think the ayes have it.
The bill for an act to amend the Electronic Transaction Act, Chapter 229.03 of the Substantive Laws of Belize, Revised Edition 2011, to promote the development of the legal and business infrastructure necessary to implement secure electronic commerce, to better facilitate electronic filing of documents with public bodies, and to promote efficient delivery by public bodies of the services by means of reliable electronic record, and to provide for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto.
I recognize the Leader of Government Business.
Mr. President, I move that the Senate do now adjourn.
I recognize Senator Smith.
We have recently received some news that as Belizeans, it has made us a bit more concerned as it relates to the issue with coronavirus. As such, we note that there has been heightened panic from people all over and concern as to whether we have or how wide is the community spread that we have at this time. There's also concern regarding the education of our children, which is a very important area, and as unions, we do agree and we accept that education is quite important. It's very important. We understand that, and we know that many of our parents want to see their children in school. Our teachers want to be in school, but the situation at hand has made many of us think twice. Our parents are very much concerned with their children's safety and the ability of our schools and teachers to keep their children safe while in our care. Our teachers are similarly concerned, not just about their students, but about themselves. Especially seeing that a lot of our teachers might not live in the area where they teach, but they commute, and should something happen at the village where they are, for example, they are able to, or they could possibly take back whatever infections they may have to the community where they live. Our people have a great responsibility of ensuring that we are as safe as possible. We keep hearing the persons in the medical field, we hear our leaders, we hear the police department, my colleague AG, keep reminding us about wearing our masks, social distancing, washing of hands, And for some reason, lately we have seen where many persons have not been taking these advice seriously. And so we see people walking around with masks under their chin as though they are decorations on their forehead, you know, not realizing how easily we can help to spread from our end. Mr. President, we are aware of some teachers who have been quarantined because of this situation. And we don't know at this time whether they will be positive or not. We're hoping that they're not. But it shows the level to which this disease can spread. Now, we try our very best to assure our people that there is no way that everything is going to be perfect. We can't have things perfect and guarantee that nobody will get ill at any point in time. That we cannot do. But what we've been trying to say is that our schools must do its best to ensure that we have things in place. And in visiting our schools countrywide, we have noted via our reps on the ground, our teachers in the schools, that many of our schools are not fully prepared for reopening because they don't have what it is that they are required to have right now. Despite that, we see our teachers going to school on a daily basis, doing their best, seeking donations. Principals are out there begging to get stuff for their school. And that is commendable. We must commend them for the efforts that they have been making. We do have some managements who have been trying their best, even the small ones, trying their best, seeking donations everywhere to get their school grounds prepared for our children to return to the classroom. And we have to commend them. We have to also commend Dr. Manzanero, the health team, you know, all the frontline workers, our police officers. I visited Santa Cruz recently, and I spoke to the officers who were there. And they too are very concerned, and we can't blame them because, you know, they are at a point where people cross on a daily basis. But we must commend them, the President, for the work that they are doing in ensuring that all of us remain as safe as we can. I would like to ask our parents to take some time, and if it is that we have asked not to return to school on Monday because of the situation, but I want to ask our parents to take on the responsibility of ensuring that their children engage in meaning. As they were doing that, teach them about math and measurement and these kinds of things. Because all of us must do our part to ensure that while our children are not physically in a classroom, learning is still occurring. I want to appeal to our teachers, our principals, our managements as well, that during this time, we look at preparing ourselves for in the event that there has to be a lockdown, that before that time comes, you will have a proper plan in place. Whether we are going to be doing online, whether we are going to be sending home packages to our students, that we take this time to be at school and work on these programs to ensure that our children are getting educational materials if and when we end up in another lockdown. It's very important. So while our teachers have been asked not to return to school, it does not mean that we are saying that they must stay home and get paid for no reason at all. That is not what we are saying. We are saying that we want our teachers to take the time to prepare to help their students, their children, our children, and we want our parents to do their best as well. And so as we move forward, we continue to pray for the best, Mr. President, but we must continue to do our part to ensure that we do not continue the spread of the coronavirus due to a reckless behavior. That is very important. And so I want to echo that. I cannot say that enough times. Follow the protocols. Wear your mask, wash your hands, social distance, everything that you can do to help us as a country to be able to get over this. We see the larger countries, the difficulty they are having with the health system because of numbers. We are not at that level, and so we cannot afford that. So I beg and I ask our people, please, let's pay attention. Let's abide by these things. Let's help our country. This is our country, our people, our children. If we don't do it, then we are pushing ourselves to a point where we will have something in our hands that we can't handle. So I pray that we will listen, and that again our teachers and our parents will do their best to engage our children during this time, because we are all going through a lot of stress as we try to deal with what is happening. So thank you, Mr. President, and we look forward, and I ask that all of us continue to keep safe and to help your families to remain safe. Thank you.
Honorable members, the question is that the Senate do now stand adjourned. All those in favor kindly say aye. Those against kindly say no. I think the ayes have it. The Senate is now adjourned.